anybody say they know the general? I doubt it. He looks so cold, quiet, and grand.
I think that Lee should have been hanged. It was all the worse that he was a good man and a fine character and acted conscientiously. It's always the good men who do the most harm in the world. Henry Adams.
Lee is one of the most difficult people to talk about because he's been immortalized, or as they call him now, some people, the marble man. He's been dehumanized by the glory and the worship. He was a warm, outgoing man, always had time for any private soldier's complaint. Once a Northern soldier being marched to the rear as a prisoner complained to Lee in person that someone had taken his hat. And he said that man got it, and Lee made the man give him his hat back.
The man Grant faced across the Rapidan River in Virginia came from a family as celebrated as Grant's was obscure. Robert E. Lee was born in 1807 at Stratford in Westmoreland County, Virginia, and was raised by his mother. She taught him to revere General Washington, a neighbor remembered, to practice self-denial and self-control in all things. His father, Light Horse Harry Lee, had been a friend and favorite lieutenant of George Washington. But Light Horse Harry also squandered 2 wives' fortunes before deserting his family for the West Indies. At West Point, Robert E. Lee did not earn a single demerit. Classmates called him the marble model, but liked him in spite of his perfection. He was graduated second in his class in 1829. In 1831, he married Martha Washington's granddaughter, Mary Custis. She bore him 7 children and endured his long absences as best she could. The mansion at Arlington with its 250 slaves was her home before it was his. Appointed to the prestigious Corps of Engineers, he was 3 times promoted for bravery during the Mexican War, where he once met a young Ulysses S. Grant. Superintendent of West Point, captor of John Brown, he was at the start of the war the nation's most promising soldier. In 1861, Lee refused command of the Union Army and followed his state out of the Union, not because he approved of slavery or secession, but because he believed his first duty was to Virginia.
I did only what my duty demanded. I could have taken no other course without dishonor.
The man who stood before us was the realized King Arthur. The soul that looked out of his eyes was as honest and fearless as when it first looked out on life. One saw the character as clear as crystal, without complication, and the heart as tender as that of ideal womanhood.
A Union girl watching Lee ride past her Pennsylvania home said, "I wish he were ours." Early in the war, he was ridiculed as the King of Spades because of his fondness for entrenching, and Granny Lee because of his gray hair and strict ways. But after he drove McClellan off the peninsula, stopped Pope at Second Manassas, demolished Burnside at Fredericksburg, and destroyed Hooker at Chancellorsville, all despite overwhelming odds, he won the unshakable confidence of Jefferson Davis and the unqualified love of his officers and men.
He is a very great general, and he's superb on both the offensive and the defensive. He took long chances, but he took them because he had to. If Grant had not had superior numbers, he might have taken chances as long as Lee took. The only way to win was with long chances, and it made him brilliant.
No one ever called him Bobby Lee to his face. His men called him Marse Robert or Uncle Robert. He had a terrible temper, which he worked all his life to control. When angered, his icy stare was unforgettable.
There was a young man brought before him for some infraction of the rules. And can you imagine being brought before General Lee for having broken the rules? And the young man was trembling. And Lee said, "You need not be afraid. You'll get justice here." And the young man said, "I know it, General. That's what I'm scared of."
He referred to the Union Army as those people rather than as the enemy. Now, those people had a new commander, whom Lee had not tested.